Hi, everyone. Welcome to our next miraculous moment. And once again, I am delighted how these interviews are showing up around me. I get to introduce you to a friend of mine who I met. We can't quite remember, but it definitely was closer to 9, possibly even 10 years ago, before I even lived in San Diego. We were both speaking at an event, met each other really early on. And you know how you have that really sweet connection with somebody and it's like, oh, it's you. That's how I feel about Ron Baker. And I am actually going to take time to read some of this because this man has had, shall we say, a fairly unique and blessed life. And just like some of my previous guests, we could be spending a lot of time talking about miraculous moments. So let me just share some about my friend Ron Baker. Ron is the founder of a school of self-mastery in New York City, bioenergetics, therapist, a healer, a speaker, an author. And Ron has had the opportunity to guide thousands of clients, and that is not an exaggeration, from around the world through a unique process of personal transformation over the last 25 years. Ron has led 16 worldwide events from sacred sites like the Great Pyramid of Egypt and Machu Picchu, Peru, inspiring millions of people from around the world to join together. Ron is releasing a memoir called Empowered at Last, a journey from wounded to wiser that is intended to be released this next spring of 2022. Now, what I also want to mention is prior to all of this, Ron also has been a very accomplished professional opera singer. He has held, get this, over 60 leading roles in opera and Broadway shows, including the lead in Phantom of the Opera, where he shared the stage with Kristen Chenoweth. He has had the gift of singing with celebrities, dining with royalty, and even sharing the stage with 2 Supreme Court justices. Who has that happen? So I am delighted, of course, to have my friend Ron Baker join us. So welcome, and thank you for being willing to share some of your beautiful gifts and talents and experiences with us today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. What fun. So first of all, tell me, I always like to ask this, obviously, if you're being willing to come on and share a miraculous moment, you must at some level believe in miracles. Um, well,
I
that's good.
totally experience life as a miracle, that life dances with our lives in such clear, practical ways. We could talk for weeks and weeks about this. Just to awaken more and more of our inner potential and to find out that so much more is possible than how most of us grew up and the tiny little comfort zones that we grew up in. And so
Or excuse me for interrupting, or didn't grow up in.
yeah, well, I definitely grew up in a tiny comfort zone.
Yeah, yeah.
Having to figure out almost everything on my own and whatever, but to be able to have the choice to do an inner journey and awaken more and more and more of self, that to me is more miraculous than all of those opportunities that you listed. The fact that healing is possible, the fact that profound connection and intimacy is possible, lots and lots of potentials that just weren't talked about when I was growing up. And that to me is miraculous. So we could talk on practical levels on bigger levels and even on grand levels about some of the miracles that have happened.
Yeah. Well, let's begin.
Cool.
So, why don't you share one of your miraculous moments that you want to share with the.
Yeah. When you asked me about this, I thought, you know what? Rather than jumping to one of the grand miracles that happened on the journeys, specifically in Egypt and Israel, I felt compelled to share about a heart to heart miracle that occurred when I was in my, oh, late 20s. I was a musician and I studied piano with a remarkable woman named Gladys Sylvester.
Mm.
And I adored her so much. And when I graduated from high school, I had gone away and done things, and my career took off. And I was in North Carolina visiting my mother in my late 20s. And all of a sudden, Mrs. Sylvester pops in my head. And I'm like, and I just got this feeling that I needed to go and visit her. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's like a 2 hour drive that way, a 2 hour drive back, and I have to catch a plane. But you know what? I love following those green lights, as I call them, on the inside. And so I did, and I drove to her house. So many lovely memories pulling into her driveway, knocked on the door. Her son answered the door. Mrs. Sylvester was, goodness, I'm sure she was at least 80 at this point, maybe 85. And her son answered the door and looked kind of shocked, and he didn't say anything, and he walked away and brought Mrs. Sylvester back. When she saw me, she burst into tears. She said, "You're not going to believe this. Just yesterday, I said out loud, I'll probably never see Ronnie," that's what she called me, "I'll probably never see Ronnie again." So moving. So I went in and sat down and we were chatting and it was lovely and whatever. And out of the blue, she says, "I know this is a little awkward to ask, but is there any way you would consider singing at my funeral?" And I was like, um, "I would much rather sing at your birthday party." And she goes, "You don't know when my birthday is." I remembered it was one day prior to my mother's birthday. And I go, "December 10th. She starts crying again. So we had a lovely visit and I left. I went back to New York City and I got notification that year, like, I don't even know, months later, that Mrs. Sylvester had died. And I looked at my schedule because somebody sent me a clipping of the announcement of her funeral. And she had asked me personally to be there. And so I looked at the date. Oh my gosh. I was literally scheduled to do a world premiere at Lincoln Center on that day.
Mm.
And I was like, how do I make a decision here? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Another miracle of this story is that the phone rings a couple of days later. A woman's voice, whom I'd never heard, says, "Is this Ronnie Baker?" Yes. I know it's funny to hear my name like that.
That's okay. I like it.
And I'm like, "Yes." So I knew it was somebody from my early life. And she said, "I am Gladys's sister.
Mm.
And I felt compelled to call you and tell you that I spoke to her after your visit. And I wanted you to know that it was the happiest that I had heard her sound in such a very long time. And when we chatted, I said, oh my gosh, I have to tell you, she asked me to do this for her, and this is what I have to do." And her sister says, I'm getting goosebumps all over my body. Uh, Her sister says, Perhaps that's the reason I felt compelled to call you. Let me tell you how thrilled Gladys would be, knowing you're doing a world premiere at Lincoln Center. Just think of her when you go to do this or before you go out. And of course I did. And there were so many little miracles in that story, I had to share it.
Wow. You know, this is why I'm so grateful that somehow my mom, really, in my situation with my mom, sparked the idea of connecting with wonderful people like you and sharing experiences. You know, so, you're right. Sometimes we never know a little something. They don't have to be ginormous. Sometimes they are. And I know you're going to share something a little bit more in a second. Um, but like you said, this is so heartfelt that you had a little niggle, a little, I also call them green lights, that
Oh,
for
cool.
whatever reason, you just knew that you needed to go see her. And the difference it made for both of you. And even then after that, seeing the conflict that you had with truly an amazing experience that was right in front of you to be performing at the Lincoln Center, you know, that in itself is rather spectacular. And quite honestly, we'll call it miraculous too. I mean, it wasn't totally miraculous. You
To go
earned.
from Tinyville, North Carolina to that is kind of a miracle.
Okay, I'll give you that. And but that's a great example of what is possible. None of us know what is possible in our lives when we open up, we listen, we're willing to take steps. You know, you didn't get that engagement right at the beginning. There were probably a few steps prior to that. I'm being very kind. And, but none of us know. But to be willing to take those steps, to be willing to be open to allow the magic and the miracles that life has to offer.
Willingness is one of my favorite qualities out of all of them that someone can develop. It's gorgeous. Please keep going.
Yeah, so it's just so so important to me why I'm doing this, to hopefully support somebody else, or hopefully a lot of somebody else's, to realize that if there's a desire in your heart, it's your truth. And it's to kind of follow the yellow brick road in how you're being guided and what steps to take so that you can close that gap from where you are to where you want to be.
Yeah.
So, oh, I just thank you. I love that one. And I know that you said that you had another. I know that we could have a lot of them, but I asked you maybe,
Well, to close that one out, I
yeah,
would just encourage anyone who's listening, when someone in your life pops in your head, reach out. We have such an easy way to text and just reach out and tell people you're thinking of them and that they matter to you. That can be a little miracle in people's lives.
it you it's so true. You never
Yeah.
know. I just this week had to transfer my mom from memory care to skilled nursing. And I don't mind sharing, you know, because it's been COVID, there have been a lot of restrictions in being able to be with her and see her.
Mhm.
And a lot of those loosened up where she had been, but they're very tight in skilled nursing. I, during COVID, I was emailing the CEO of this facility. It's a pretty large facility, over 300, 350 people, a
Mhm.
lot. It's big, you know, from independent, assisted, memory care, and skilled nursing. And I would email the CEO. I'd also be emailing her direct care people, the people that headed up her unit, just saying, you know, expressing from my heart how I'm so grateful for the sacrifices that they're making, for all that they're doing, knowing that we can't be with our loved ones. And the CEO just recently even just shared with me, because she actually came and helped me make the move. Um, and she said, you don't know the timing of your emails. They would come in a moment where they were so well needed and so appreciated. And you're right. I didn't know. I was just saying, please, thank you, and so to
Following
your
your green
point,
lights.
what?
Following your green lights.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And so we don't know. I've had people years later say, "Oh my gosh, that conversation that we had about you running, that's really dating me because I haven't run in a long time. I used to be a runner until I did a wonderful job of breaking my leg. Um, but saying that got me started on a health kick, and I became a runner and loved it. That's just one of a gazillion. We just don't know. But when we just reach out, oh, the difference it can make, especially right now, because many of us are still choosing to be a little more isolated, a little bit less connected in person than we had been. Okay, so let's go to second one, please.
Okay, for this one, I need a little context.
Okay.
So, I'm a very metaphysical guy. And for anybody who's not familiar with the term, meta just means beyond physical. So we are spiritual beings, which is beyond just being physical beings. So we're metaphysical. So, whew, around the same time that I was doing my performing career, a lot of opportunities opened up, including being able to hear guidance.
Mm.
And based on that guidance, through my business partner as well as myself, but he was particularly gifted at this, we were encouraged to lead these 15 or 16 worldwide events from the Great Pyramid, etc. And so when Archangel Gabriel, who was the guide who encouraged this first journey, told us about what it was, and this was beginning a series of energetic accelerations on the planet because the planet was ready to move to a whole new level of evolution. Well, if we just look at the last 30 years, we've expanded more in 30 years of consciousness and information than we have in thousands of years. This is that energetic awakening that's happening. And so we were going to be a focal point for one of those initiations, as he called it. And he said, in order for you to know how real this is and how powerful this is, there are going to be some big signs that we give you so that eventually you can share these miraculous events to inspire other people. So this is one of those. He gave us 7 intention setting ceremonies to do. One of those, when we moved from Egypt to Israel, was to go to the Dead Sea. This is the lowest point on the planet, and it is so dense with salt that everything just floats. So we were given a particular exercise to do while we were there. As we approached the area, the weather changed so much, perhaps the blackest clouds I've ever seen. The entire sky filled with black, black clouds. And so we were concerned about taking people into the water in case there was a storm and lightning and whatever. So we proceeded, and as we were walking toward the water, an opening occurred in the clouds, and the sun shone through, and shearlings of light formed a pyramid. Well, that was just the first of the openings. Then gradually, 3 holes on either side of the main one opened. Now, if you know about our energy system, we have 7 energy centers. The heart is in the middle, and 3 energy centers on either side. And here we're seeing it in the sky. And it stayed open for well over an hour while we did our ritual or ceremony. And as we were walking back to get on the bus, it all closed up again. I felt like we were in the Ten Commandments movie. It was profound, so cool.
I
And
can,
so that's one of many miracles that occurred on our 16 journeys.
wow. You know, being somebody that was very traditional, I was probably a little intuitive prior to my accident. Obviously, after my accident, that all broke wide open, and little by little, you know, started cultivating my gifts, my talents, my intuition, all of that. I don't yet receive guidance that way. Although if I write, I will. But for a lot of people that aren't there yet, because personally, I remember how, what's the word I'm looking for? It was very unsettling at first because it was totally foreign to me that suddenly, well, the first piece was while I was learning to meditate. I started to just do sound healing work. I didn't know that's what it was. I was having this melodic type singing come out of me that relaxed my mind so I could meditate, and it relaxed my body. I did not know initially that there were healing gifts that were really coming through that now have helped, like you, um, hundreds of thousands of people. And and then I'm at this where I was learning how to meditate in somebody's home. I'm passing by somebody, and I see I'm walking by this person, and out of my mouth comes, "Oh, you have a block around your heart." And I'm thinking to myself, where did that come from? And what was a gift at that time, I was walking further down the hall. The person who was teaching us had a son who was a teen at that time, but very gifted, very intuitive. And I hear him somewhere behind me saying to the same person, "Hey, you got a block around your heart." And I'm thinking, what's happening to me? You know, so, and there's obviously way more to all of how this evolved over time and is now what I'm proud of, the miraculous living method. But for those who maybe are having little curiosity, maybe they're just curious, maybe they're having a
That's how
little,
mine began.
yeah. So what would you say to somebody that is more in that realm?
Well, most people are in newness about all this. And another message from Gabriel was everyone has the capacities that you're awakening. You've just chosen on a soul level to go down the road a little sooner so that you can encourage others to begin to connect and open and trust and listen. So perhaps that's why I shared the first one,
Yeah,
because I hadn't done formal work when I felt that inner intuition to go and visit my piano teacher.
right.
And so if we start to listen to what feels right,
Yes,
that's miraculous. It's
absolutely.
like a calm truth. It's just, I don't know where it came from, but I feel like I just need to call Susie.
Right.
And so if we'll listen and if we'll nurture ourselves and we'll nurture one another just by holding a space of listening or whatever,
Right.
more of that inner self opens, which
Yes.
is perhaps why I started about how it's miraculous that we have these tiny little comfort zones and we learn to claim more and more and more of our potential. That's profound.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how far we've come. We live in a society that only thinks the most remarkable, that's crap. Were we more lovable in fifth grade than we were in first grade? No. We just had gone further down the road with more experiences. We're sacred at every stage. So if we learn to see ourselves, acknowledge ourselves, encourage one another, we're going to naturally grow. And I imagine when someone can do miracles like turning water into wine, it's not a big deal. They just reach that level of being able to direct energy that way. But doing calculus seems like a profound miracle to a third grader.
Are you kidding? To a 70-year-old.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so I think it really, I think your point is very well taken. And one thing I do want to emphasize, because you're speaking to how you receive information. People receive intuition. Your inner guidance system is expressed differently. Some people do hear. I have asked multiple times. I even was recently on a podcast with somebody that's very intuitive. And he said, "Oh, yeah, you're very auditory." And speaking of which, can you hear the helicopter is literally flying right over my house? I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, we will pay attention. And he's saying, you're very auditory. You know, you would be receiving guide. You're very strong in auditory guidance. And I'm like, if I am, there's something interfering. And I think also because I had my head injury and my brain injury, and I had some issues with that for quite some time, it did allow me to develop my feeling sense, my knowing got very highly developed, which really is my predominant one, at least in this moment. And I will on occasion see something, because some people get images. So it just depends. And I think the important part, what you're saying is, no matter how you might be receiving it, there ultimately will be a feeling that you will get, that you just know, oh, pay attention.
Yeah.
And it will take you to wonderful, wonderful places when you do pay attention to it.
Yeah. In the School of Self Mastery, where I teach people how to get in connection with more and more of self, not two people process the same way, the same pace, the same gifts. It's so cool that we're all so uniquely sacred.
Yeah. And designed, just like our thumbprints. I don't know how many gazillion times I have said that,
Yeah.
but just like your thumbprint, there is no other human being just like you. And that is part of our job in life, to
Mm,
discover what's unique about you so
mm.
that you can identify your gifts. You may not know their gifts, because the tricky part of gifts is typically is something very natural that comes to you. And that was my case with being able to diagnose. I've always been a really good diagnostician. And I just thought everybody was like that until one of my professors in graduate school said something. I went, oh,
Yeah.
could have told me that before, might have made this process a little more fun. Um,
Yeah.
but, and to cultivate it in a way that you develop the skills necessary so that you can make your mark in life,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Absolutely.
that's what we're also here for.
Yeah. I consider a number of things in the category of gifts: interests, priorities, capacities, and then talents as well. So, qualities, those are gifts. The quality of courage is a gift. The quality of sensitivity is a gift. So, we haven't lived in a world that's taught us to champion self and to get to know the inner self. And that's crucial for anyone who wants to truly blossom into more and more fulfilling lives.
I even want to add something that I think is really important to what you're saying. Also, the challenges that we have had to face in our lives, and I know you and I both have had a whole bucket of them, those are gifts as well. And it does come down to courage and willingness to to embrace whatever you are faced with, because, the old saying, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, kind of thing.
Hmm.
You and I both have always been willing to face the challenge, the disappointment, the heartache, whatever it has been, and grow from it. And I think it develops not only character and resilience, but a deep compassion for whatever somebody else might be experiencing as well.
Well, let me say, in response to you claiming that I've always been willing, I haven't. I had to develop my gift of willingness,
Mm,
but I was willing to be true to what I was ready for or not yet ready for. And so there were plenty of challenges that I had early on. I wasn't ready. And I put them off, or I buried them, or whatever I did. I avoided talking about those challenges. And only when I began to look and prepared and connected and learned how to nurture was I more willing. I was always willing to do the achievement thing, but the inner and the challenge stuff, not as developed a willingness, but now for sure.
yeah. The gift for me was I was in so much pain, I was willing to try anything.
That's the deal. That's how our challenges serve us. They become great motivators. So awesome. I'm releasing that memoir as you talked about in the spring, and I share about my story mostly to show how initial challenges motivate us toward the discoveries and the solutions, and learning how to nurture and how to reach deeper truths. They serve us in this way.
Yeah, I agree. Wow. We could probably keep going on and on and on and on and on. And maybe we will another time.
Yeah.
But I thank you for sharing just a little bit of your miraculous moments, for sharing a bit of who you are, who I've grown. Well, it wasn't even grown to love. With you, it was instant love. It
Yeah.
was like, hello.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
consider those miracles of reconnecting with people from our soul family. We have soul history.
Yeah. Yeah. And just like we said the other day, last week when we actually spoke, um, we hadn't connected in some time. And yet it just was like, oh, picking up right where we left off. And to me, that is the beauty of true friendship. So thank you. I adore and love you. And I think, and I'm just grateful that you took the time to share yourself with the people who are listening at this
Of
time.
course. Back
Thank
at you too.
you.
Okay. All the best.